criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor David Bruno, and family law and trial attorney Randy Kessler. So, Randy, now I'm going to go back to you. Finally, getting back to you. Your thoughts on the closing arguments today and where this case stands as far as this jury deliberating.
Well, I agree with David. It'd make better TV if I could disagree with him, right? And I could argue. But I think, sometimes closing arguments are important. In civil cases, sometimes lawyers waive the closing argument and say we don't even need that, which I think is ridiculous. But in a case that is circumstantial evidence, like David pointed out, in a case where you don't have the smoking gun, literally or figuratively, when you don't have an eyewitness, when you don't have a confession, that's when you need a really, really, really good closing argument. I think this prosecutor did the best with what he had, but you don't have something. You can't just stand up there and say, look, this person was an eyewitness. If you believe this person, the case is over. The scientist testified, here's the DNA on the gun that shot the person. Case over. He had to weave it together. It takes an incredible TV-like performance where you've got writers, and we've all seen, TV shows and movies where they're phenomenal closing arguments. But think about it, those writers spend years and thousands of dollars preparing a closing statement to try to put together the convincing argument. This was a hard one to do. Closing arguments were important. I think the defense had the easier job and probably did a better job because she basically called it like she saw it. She didn't pick apart their case. She basically said they have no case. She called BS on them and said they have to prove it, and they didn't prove it. And that's really, what she should have done.
Yeah, no question. And David Bruno, I guess if you say it often enough, maybe it sticks with the jury. I think there was a little bit of a case there, but she highlighted this idea that the prosecution sort of came up with a theory in closing that he actually killed her in the woods. First time anyone heard that. I remember taking notes when that was going on and saying, wow, I never heard that before. Is that problematic for the state?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, look, even as you're asking questions through the presentation of evidence or the opening statement, he had the opportunity to lay out that theory of the case as well. It comes as a surprise as the closing, and she did a great job of pointing that out. I mean, it goes to the credibility of the investigation. It goes to the credibility of the prosecutor. Even though he's not on trial there, those jurors are sitting in that box, and they're assessing the credibility of the attorneys as well. So great points by the defense. I really liked the connection that she had. At first, I was a little turned off by her initially, but she and her demeanor and her approach grew on me as I continued to watch it, and it just set up perfectly for the type of defense she has and the circumstantial nature of the prosecution's case.
Yeah, that's interesting because I thought the same thing. Initially, I thought she was a little overbearing, a little bit too sort of passionate. But I think eventually that passion won over, and she just was someone who was convinced of the innocence of her client. And I think that's very important for a defense attorney. All right, guys, stand by. We have to take a quick break right now. As the jury